Hey everybody, Nick here, and today we got a disassembly as well as some first impressions for you on this little guy right here. This is the Reate Knives Bushido. Bushido, something along Bushido. I'm sure there's somebody out there who's speaking the Japanese. They can enlighten me as to the true pronunciation of that word. But for the moment, I'm going to go ahead and just say Bushido and call it a day. I'm sure somebody is cringing right now because they have spent, well, I was fuddling around with, that's not even a word, around with pocket knives. They learned the way of the blade. It has brought them great critical acclaim, success with the romantic partners of their choice, all sorts of things. But I, like a beta lambda at this point, have been not doing that. Anyways, I digress. Let's take this knife apart. What we did notice ahead of time is that this knife was well scented, so that wasn't a problem. What I'm hoping is I can take this guy apart from this side by taking out the pivot, which, by the way, was free spinning, which was not great. Yeah, okay, great. So then I take these two screws on the inside out here, and that should let me get the rest of the way in here. And this does give us kind of a weird flip-flop disassembly, wherein I'm going to try and take it apart from sort of the opposite side, because the pivot is mounted in on this side, but hopefully it'll work out. Probably just tight tolerances. Can I get this pivot out of here? I can. Once I get the pivot out of there, that lets me get the blade out of there, especially once it's off the detent. Really, I should have done that with the blade open, but this'll work. Oh, internal stop pin. Okay. But either way, we're coming apart now, and life is good. All right, so what we see here construction-wise is nothing really fancy. We see an internal stop pin. We see, ooh, no wonder this wasn't running so smooth. We see a bunch of gunky something or another up in there. This thing appears to have been coated with some kind of nasty grease, so this should definitely run better once we're done with it. We see not much in the way of fancy construction. There is no internal milling here. There is no lock bar insert. There is no really much of anything. It's just sort of a piece of titanium here. Well, a pair of pieces of titanium. We do see steel washers inside the tie, which is always nice to see. And then we see the blade is fine. Studying the ways of the blade. I know that there are people who genuinely have studied the ways of the blade, but I can't picture anybody who doesn't wear a fedora regularly saying that. And I say that, by the way, as a guy who does occasionally wear a fedora. So, you know, it's biased, but it's against my own people, I suppose. I'm a self-hating, cringy human. Anyways, I digress. I'll occasionally get commenters come into the channel and say something like, "Oh my God, cringe! You have no idea how cringy your content is." It's like, how do you think I have no idea of that? This is something I've been dealing with all my life. Of course I'm familiar with that. That's like walking up to a guy with no legs and saying, "Dude, you have no idea how few legs you have." Like, yeah, no, I'm aware. Thank you. Just like, "You have small hands." Like, you don't say. Anyways, wow, I'm way off topic today, but that's okay, because the topic here is just pretty straightforward, right? We're damn near done with cleaning this knife up here. I'll go ahead and I'll just clean off these washes. Oh, actually, I guess that'll work too. I was going to try and wipe them with a Q-tip, but instead I'll just pop them out and clean them that way. It is important, well, mildly important. See how there's a groove on one side of these? Make sure everything goes back in with the proper groove and the proper orientation. And now let's go ahead and slap this whole thing back together. If you're curious, by the way, about any of the tools I'm using during this or any other disassembly, go to nickshabazz.com/tools. That should get you everything you need to know. You know, got links and everything like that. So, how do I want to put this together? How do I want to do this? I want to start off probably like so. Yeah, I think I'm going to do it this way. I don't love the idea of reassembling this knife, but just in terms of, I mean, it beats not reassembling it, but it's going to be a little tricky. The reason it's tricky is because the pivot is kind of going in through the wrong side here. And it's possible that I could flip the pivot around and that would make things a little bit better, but I don't necessarily trust there may be concerns and reasons why that can't be the case. So, yeah. I'm just going to go ahead and do it the way that it seems like it needs to be done here. Go ahead and I'll start off by applying some of this 10-weight nano oil to the pivot itself. This will have two consequences. A, it'll make it a little easier to fit it through this titanium piece here. There we go. And B, that'll be what the blade rides on. Next thing, I'll put a little bit of dot of this right into here. Beautiful. Rotate, rotate, rotate. Beautiful. Next up, we do this and this. And just drop a little bit in there into your detent ball hole. And that should give me plenty of lubricity for the future here. Okay, this goes in this way. Good. Put the blade on. All right, now I drop in this bearing here, and right now I'm just using that to spin the bearings a little bit. Okay, next up, I need to drop this. Yeah, it's fine. I'll just drop this onto place there. Next thing, I need to get the stop pin in place. That's important, as well as this locating pin in the back here. Both of those things are simultaneously. Oh, this is actually going way easier than I expected it to. That's awesome. Okay. What I'm going to go ahead and do to start with is use a little bit of Loctite on the pivot here. Put everything back into position. So one of the things that's going to come up inevitably in the comment thread is that when this knife was first released, there were some objections raised by a French knife maker, Guy Paghetti, and Editions G, whose work I've actually reviewed before on the channel. Editions G, that is, not Guy. I've never had any of his stuff, and it's probably Guy. But still, because he's French. But nonetheless, there were some objections raised about the similarity of this to another design that they'd proposed. However, it's worth noting that the relevant parties, Reate as well as Guy, as well as the Editions G folk, all sat down at the table and walked away from the table very happy. So I don't know the details of that deal, but everybody seems to be quite content with things, and Guy has no hard feelings, that is, and so therefore I'm not gonna treat this as a hard feeling sort of situation. I don't know exactly how it was resolved, but as long as everybody is happy with it, and that's kind of a thing. At some level, dude, it's a Kwaiken, right? It's not like it's that far off of anything traditional Japanese, right? So it's not like, oh wow, this is a unique design that no one has ever done before. No, absolutely not. But instead, it's just, as long as everybody's happy. Oh wow, that got smoother. Okay, that's way over tightened. But still, as long as everybody's happy, I don't particularly mind. And frankly, that's the way I wish a lot of those things would go. When there's a design similarity, you just talk to somebody, talk to the other people involved, and work it out from there. Seems easier than going the big dramatic route, right? Okay, Okay, there is substantial blade play there, so I need to tighten this up a little bit. And no play. And centered. A little grit, but that could actually just be the finish on the blade rubbing against the detent ball. So you see here, this has got something, I'm not going to go ahead and call it a hand rub, but it's got a finish that's much more akin to a hand rub finish on your classical conventional pocket knife. And so as a result, when that's going over the blade, seems reasonable. But all right, we are now play-free. We are now smoother than we started off, and everything seems to be doing fine. So we can jump into the second part of this, which is first impressions. First impressions of this knife are predominantly positive. The couple of things that are really important here come to mind are the action. Action's good. The detent on this guy is actually reasonably hard. It's not terrible, but it's a little harder than some of the front flippers out there in the world. And as a result, it's going to deploy reliably, but it's going to take a little bit of force there. One other thing that's worth noting is that there is the possibility of the index finger wraparound with this, having it so high up there, and that's going to be appealing to a lot of people. The nature of the jimping is good. Position of the pocket clip is good for the front flipping action, and the blade itself is reasonably nice. It comes down to a pretty thin edge. It's M390, right? It's got a nice, reasonably thin tip here. And most importantly, and perhaps most surprisingly, when I first saw this come out, anytime I see a wide blade and a skinny handle, my first thought is, oh my God, this is going to cut me when it's closed. But they have done it in such a way that that's not really a major concern. I mean, in theory, you could jam your finger in there and touch the edge of the blade. But the blade stock they used, although a little bit on the thicker side, is not so thick that that's going to cut you open. So I'm pretty reasonably happy about that. Fit and finish is typical of Reate. This material, actually, this polished burlap micarta is quite nice. And it really does add something. I think this knife in the carbon fiber, although it's fine, I don't know that it would have the same sort of charm to it. The polished burlap micarta almost gives it sort of a woody feeling to it. And I think that adds to the whole, I know the ways of the blade, sort of katana, well, I suppose, not katana, Huaycan, mystique to it. But yeah, so that's been nice. I mean, aside from that, there's really not that much more to say about it. I don't recall the price, and that's by design, so I can write the review without thinking about price, then learn the price and see how that changes my feelings. But nonetheless, yeah, it's pretty damn good. You got to really love the design. You got to like the aesthetics here, but for the most part, there's really little objection here. And it's nice to see sort of another traditional style front flipper. And I say traditional, and I mean somebody else's tradition, right? Like it kind of reminds me in many ways of like the Pena front flipper trappers and that kind of thing, but which the X series versions are made by Reate too. Mine worn out on loan, I'd be pulling that into the frame. But anyways, probably will for the final review. But anyways, there you go. I hope this has been interesting to you, that you enjoyed these impressions, that you took the guy apart. And I'd really recommend taking it apart because mine got way smoother and nicer after I did so. So anyways, have a good one, everybody. Bye now.